Hello to all of you. I'm happy as today we have a special guest for our new episode on Student Consulting Podcast. So our guest is going to reveal and to share with us from her experience what are the steps in order to create a remarkable common application essay if you want to apply in the United States. She has already over 30 years of experience in this field. She is a consultant in the United States, and she's going to share with us, as I've told you, how to create a remarkable common application essay, what are the tips and tricks in order to create such an essay, what are the common mistakes that students are making when they are creating, when they are starting their essay. So let's meet Jane Hirschhorn, and she's going to reveal more information about herself. Jane, I hope that the last name is the correct one.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Leah.
Jane, can you please tell us a little bit about you? How did you build your expertise until this moment, as you are working as student consulting with our students for the essays? So we would like to know more about your experience and what recommends you to work with students in United States and as well now in Romania.
Okay, well, thank you. So I really started as you mentioned, Leah, I've been working in the education space for about 30 years. And 10 years ago, when I started my company, I had a student whose mom wanted me to help her son with his college essay because it was getting to be that time. And so even though I had been a writing coach for, about 2 decades at that point, I decided I still needed to learn a little bit about the college essay because the last time I'd seen one was when I applied to college a long time ago. So I did that in part by doing a lot of research, certainly like looking at print resources, books, online resources. There are a lot of coaches out there who specifically work on college essay, and also looking at samples of student work. So a lot of websites now have, college websites have particular essays that work with students. So it was a variety of ways of different types of research. And I also feel like my expertise comes from working with students and learning a little bit about who they are and how they can showcase their, at least a small part of their best self in a college essay.
You've started already to work with us since last year, so you have already experience with Romanian students. I would like to ask you, how do you see Romanian students up until this moment? What is your opinion on what activities they have, how they are prepared, if they are prepared for application in the United States?
So one of the things I've noticed, first of all, is that their command of English is excellent, so really fluent. In speaking and also their writing. I'm working with some students this year, and I've told them some of your writing skills are stronger than some of the students that I work with, either on college essay or on schoolwork. So very, very strong writing skills. I think a similarity between Romanian students and American students in their writing is that the essays that they write in school are very, very different than the ones they have to write on the college essay. So school essays tend to be, if it's in an English class, it's to write about a particular aspect of literature and what are the themes in that work of literature. Or if it's in a history class, they're writing about a historical event or a person and, presenting a thesis statement, a main idea, and then using evidence and analysis to support their ideas. College essay is very different. They have to write about themselves, and even how they structure their essay. And even writing about themselves, of course, is very different than writing about an historical period or a literary character. So that's one of the things that I noticed that the nice thing is that, the students who write well have those good skills. And then what I can help them with is how to see how this piece of writing is very different in terms of the content of the writing and also the audience.
Jane, I would like to ask you, based on the experience that you have until now, also with the Romanians, but also with the United States, with the Americans, there is something, a certain step that a student can do prior to arriving in the final year of high school. So because they are creating their application essay in the final year, there is anything that they can do prior to this in order to enhance their communication, their writing skills?
Are you talking about writing skills in general or writing for the college essay?
For the college essays.
So my recommendation would be to read a lot of model essays. And I tell students, all of my students, that the best way to do that is to look at specific essays like past college essays. So they can do this online, and I can certainly give you that information. There are specific schools that publish that sometimes they're called like great essays or essays that work. So they can see some of the models. Now, I will say that some of those schools that publish essays that work, they're highly selective, and they may not be an appropriate fit for the applicant, but at least they can get a general sense of what an admission office is looking for. Just prior to the taping, I was looking at one school, and what's particularly nice is they have the student essay, and then they have an admission officer explain why the essay was so effective.
I understand. Okay, so you're recommending to take or to look at such essays like some years before you are going to apply, in order to understand what is the structure, what are looking universities in general. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I could add something else. And this may not be something for all students to do, but it's certainly something every student can do, was to keep some sort of a journal, a personal journal. It could be, you know, obviously a lot of students like to keep their life on their phone, but they can write about what's going on in their life, you know, private, and just to reflect on their experiences as they have them. And so that way, when it comes time to select a topic, they'll have things to look back on. And I also tell them that phones are really powerful ways of capturing your life. Even looking at, you know, texts from friends, photos that they've taken, any kind of work that they've done online that they can sort of revisit. Those are really great, wellsprings of potential ideas for essay topics.
I understand. Okay. And can you please share with us, what does it mean, or how looks a subject for the essays, or requirement for the essay? Because I'm asking you this because you said that students, would you recommend to students to have a journal in order to write down their experience, like over the years, and then this experience to use it in these essays? This sounds like personal development more.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, it should be, I think that the journal should be something that they want to do. You know, I know that students are so busy right now, they have so much homework, but it could be a possibility of ideas for topics. You know, certainly any kind of writing practice that you do, all writing practice is good. It helps you become a better writer. But yes, I do think it could be, when it comes time to write the essay, they can say, oh, let's look back on what's been happening in my life for the past several years. Oh, here are some things that might make essay topics. And they can just go look and scroll back through their phone or through their journal and ideally find some topics.
It sounds totally different, the application essays or the requirements, comparing to what is happening to Europe. Can you please tell us some, or to share with us some requirements of essays, like from the top of your head, like what some examples, just for us to understand why should I keep a journal, and why my personal experiences are important in this application?
Okay, yeah, great question. So one of the things, like for American schools, you know, I think America, we really value the individual. It's very much a part of our national history, you know. And so college, you know, particularly selective colleges, they want to know kind of like who these applicants are, right? And so the first, you know, hoop that you have to jump through is, can the student do the work? And that's going to be, you know, covered on the transcript, right? Your grades. But they also want to know, like, who is this student beyond the classroom, beyond the readings that they'll do and the papers that they'll write, and even the class discussions. They want to know, who is the student when they're in the residence halls? Are they nice? Are they considerate? If somebody down the hall is having like a tough moment, is this person going to be concerned about them and, you know, take them for a coffee or sit and chat with them for a little while? What is important to this person outside of the dormitory? What kinds of activities are they going to be participating in? Are they going to be on the athletic fields, in performance halls, in volunteer organizations, social justice initiatives? So that's why this essay can really reflect what is important to me as a human being. I know you said it's like personal development, but it does seem like, you know, college essays, you know, since the time I've been doing it, they really want to know about the student. What do you value? And can you reflect on your life, some small part of your life, and show that you've grown and you've developed since, you know, within the past year or two?
Okay, I understand. And do you have on the top of your head any requirements from any essay from a university? a certain university, maybe.
I'm sorry, the audio cut out for a second. Requirements, could you repeat that, please?
Like from the top of your head, if you have any example of a requirement from an essay, like how it sounds, how sounds these essays?
Okay, so you're talking about like the structure of the essay or more the content?
No, the requirement, like exactly, I don't know, usually there is list to or talk about this, because we would like people, they don't understand exactly how sounds such an essay.
Okay, I understand. So first of all, the Common Application has a series of prompts. I think there's 7 of them, and they're really just general questions about, reflect upon a time where you challenged a belief or an idea, or what's something that's really interesting to you? Is there a story that you want to tell about yourself that wouldn't be captured on the application? So for example, I've had students write about baking, something that they do that wouldn't normally be on, certainly wouldn't be on a transcript, probably wouldn't be on any kind of, it might be on an activities list, but maybe not, because activities lists usually list, sports or awards that you won or clubs. And so, writing about baking, and why do you like to bake? Some students have said, I like the scientific part of it and the measurement and trying to get the exact right result, right? A delicious batch of cookies or a cake, but it also allows me to express my creativity. I've got like the basic chocolate cake, but I tried to do something different by putting a different kind of flour in or a different kind of, ingredient. It might also express how my love for people. So I baked this cake for my family because it shows how much I enjoy being with them. So that would be something where you're writing about sort of personal development. It's not just like the story of the baking, but how does the baking reflect the values of, intellectual inquiry, love, personal relationships, creativity. So that might be one example of like an essay topic. I'm trying to think of other things, like off the top of my head, like I've had a number of students write about an experience that they had as a volunteer and a specific interaction that they had with somebody as a volunteer. I've had actually 2 students write about working with a child who was nonverbal. And the writer was really concerned at the beginning, how was I going to be able to communicate with this person? And then in time, I learned about all the different ways that we communicate outside of using words, using our facial expression, using gesture. And those are sort of it's still the volunteer opportunity is captured and probably will be likely captured on another part of the application on the activities list, but it's really talking about, well, what does the story that I'm going to tell you show about my values, right? I care about communication. I care about helping others. I care about making sure each person feels valued. So it's I guess it's maybe more of a humanistic and a way to humanize you in your essay that you can't really get in the same way in the other parts of the application.
It's very interesting what you're mentioning, because as I've told you, it's totally different from what we know that the universities are asking for the Europe application. So it's totally right. European applications is totally different. Right. So I heard about baking, like people who maybe they didn't look at the common application until now, or they didn't open their account on the common application. It sounds very weird, like about baking, like in the application right. They right. To admit me based on this. So it's right. about the story, right? About something exactly. That represents me, and it's the what I've learned from that story and how that thing exactly or that passion represents me, what I've learned and what value is there for me. Okay.
Right. Right, exactly. And the other thing is that you don't have to make yourself look perfect. You can write about a mistake. Obviously, you don't want to write about a really, really serious mistake. But you can write about something that you did that maybe didn't go well and what you learned from the experience. It's very interesting. I was sitting in a lecture, this is several years ago, and somebody was talking about like failing at making pancakes with his mom or for his mom. And then a parent stood up and said, wait, are you telling me that you're writing an essay about how the writer can't follow directions? And I mean, the parent had a point, right? But it could show, well, how did you do to recover from the situation? So I could understand that parent's perspective, like, wait a minute, this is showing that you don't have like skills to function maybe in a chem lab, but it really is to show how you're human, how nobody is perfect, right? And 17-year-olds are still learning about who they are. But 17-year-olds, I believe, should have some sense of who they are by the time they write their essay and in general.
I understand. That is very profound.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. It requires the writer to talk about, kind of, right, who am I and what's important to me beyond being a successful student.
Yeah, but these are very powerful questions for anyone at any age, and usually it's very hard to answer if you don't do, if you don't keep a journal, or if you're not used with learning about yourself.
Right. Although I do think, it is a hard question, but I do think that students can do this, and there are different ways that they can do this. It might not just be like looking at their journal. It might be having a conversation with somebody, because oftentimes when you're talking about with somebody else, right, then you're starting to say, okay, well, this is sticking in my brain, the story, why? And then having a conversation will allow you to articulate that. But yes, it is not an easy process for many people.
Understanding, I have here now two questions from what we're discussing. I want to ask you, how do you guide the student in order to arrive to something that is important, meaningful for that person in order to create this essay? Because we know that there is the common app application, the essay, which is common for all the universities, the maximum 20 universities that he's applying or she's applying.
Right.
So this is a very important essay. So how do you work with students? Like, what is the procedure in working with a student in order to arrive to a certain subject that helps the student to get admitted or to showcase himself?
Great. I'm absolutely happy to answer that question. So the first of all, and I'm happy to give you those materials. I think you already have them, but if you want to include them with this broadcast. So one of the things I do, there's a lot of great, materials out there about how do you get to the essay. And the first one I like to do is called the values exercise, which is done by the college essay guy. And he publishes a very, very long list of values. And so we ask, like when I work with students, I'm like, go through and identify 10 that are meaningful to you. And it's always very interesting because at this point, I probably worked with, I don't know, maybe like close to 100 students. And every combination of words is different. Like there are some that come up over and over again, but every student has a unique, constellation of what those values are. So we kind of start with that because I feel like that's like a pretty easy thing to do. Like most people can like look on a list and pick stuff out. So it's kind of an easy way because I even though I realize it's been a long time since I've done this, I realize this is kind of an intimidating, endeavor that students, have to write this essay. And then after that, there are all kinds of brainstorming exercises. I have a sheet, which, you're welcome to, send to anybody who's interested about different ways, different lists. List 21 things about you that are interesting. List different, spaces that you occupy. I am a student. I am an older brother. I am a soccer player, etc. And then there are other questions like list something that makes you proud, something that you want to study in college. So all these questions that the student can ask themselves. And by sort of putting together all of those things, and some questions are going to resonate with more. Some students like making lists. Some students like answering questions in sentences and paragraphs. And then once you look at that brainstorming list and see what you have, is to look at that and see how it connects to the values. Because it seems like every single student that I've worked with, anything they tell me about in any detail or even in brief detail, I'll say, oh, it really sounds like that connects to your value of humor or community or personal relationships or, personal health. And so that way, when you look at the stories you have or the ideas that you have, and then look at your list, you can sort of bring those two things together and write about them in your essay, both the vignette or the individual story that you want to tell about yourself or stories and how they connect to your values.
I understand. And because we are talking about the essay here, I would like to also ask you about what can you share with us regarding the leadership activities or the leadership roles that usually universities, like the big universities, the Ivy Leagues or the top universities, they are looking for in an essay or in their activities. And what can you tell us about the leadership roles that they would need, and how they can use this in the Common Up essays, and what kind of leadership roles they need to have or are created?
Okay, well, so first of all, the one thing that I can tell you that is absolutely consistent about all American universities is there's no common consistency, right? So every school has its own little, like what are called institutional priorities, which is like what they are looking for. And the institutional priorities can change from year to year. So I use the example is, say, for instance, a school has an orchestra, they love their orchestra, and the French horn player graduates. Both of them graduate. So in that year, they're going to be looking for French horn players. So if you play the French horn, you're going to be a much more attractive candidate. And then the following year, they may be looking for a tuba player, right? Because they've got their 2 French horns. They're going to be there for the next 4 years. So as far as leadership roles, I mean, I do know that at the selective schools, they want to have students who have some sort of have taken the initiative, have been leaders, and that's going to be captured in the activities list. So a student can write about leadership roles in their essay, but it's not essential. It's not like they have to throw that in there, so it's not like you can say, okay, well, I was on the swim team and I learned this really important thing about, swimming in my time or whatever it is. I'm not a swimmer. I don't know why I picked that up. Maybe because it's raining outside. I'm thinking of swimming. Anyway, but you don't necessarily have to say as the team captain, unless you want to say, if you want to put that you were the team captain on the swim team, you really want to say, well, why is that important? Maybe you had to negotiate between the coach and a swimmer, and you had to do some negotiation. Maybe the swimmer was having a moment and the coach was having a moment, and you had to negotiate it. But it's not. But they're going to know from another part of the application. Oh, okay, this applicant is the captain of the swim team. So it's not essential that you drop that information in the essay. I am working with a student who's like dropping that information. I'm like, it's going to be covered elsewhere. So you don't, and they're going to look at your application, holistically. So they're going to look at all parts of it. So it's not absolutely essential that you put all that, sort of name drop or show your accomplishments in the essay in a quantitative way, because it's going to be captured elsewhere. The only time I would say you need to put that in there if it's an important part of the story. Maybe you were the worst swimmer on the team, and and you still are, your times are much slower than the other, breaststrokers. But if you became captain because you were really kind to all your teammates, or you noticed you were able to get people excited after sitting at the on the pool deck all day, that's interesting. But that's really more about leadership than, oh, I'm going to name drop that I became the captain. Does that make sense, Leah?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in the end, universities, what they are looking for in the essays, what kind of stories?
Yeah. Okay. So okay, value. So I would say that there are sort of 3 things that they're looking for. So first, you have to be able to show that you can write reasonably well. You do not have to be somebody who's going to major in creative writing, but you have to show that you can communicate effectively. Even some of your language doesn't have to be like by the grammar book, but it has to be conversational. It can't look like, all right, this person doesn't understand how to use possessives versus plurals, right? That's usually dealt with in like spell check. But it has to be written reasonably well. It also has to show some sort of moment of growth or reflection from what the writer starts and how they describe like who they are and kind of who they are now versus who they were maybe at the beginning of these stories that they're going to tell. And then the third thing is that they have to make themselves look attractive to a college campus, so that the admission officer, when they read that, they say, oh, wow, this person sounds really interesting, really funny, really kind. They will make a really good addition to our campus. So you have to look attractive, right? You can still be like humorous, but not necessarily attractive to a college campus, right? Or even compassionate and maybe not, you have to be appealing. So you have to look appealing, like I like this person, and that you really want to get to know this person well. So those are kind of the 3 things that the essay should do. And it's also very much that you're trying, even though you're writing for an audience, the audience is an admission office. An admission office is different than the teacher. Teacher is going to give you a grade, but the teacher might not necessarily care if you're a likable kid. Oh, that kid's a really good writer, but they're still really annoying, right, in class, for whatever reason. But you want to make it say, oh, this student sounds like a really nice person, or this person is going to challenge other students in a good way, right? So that's the impression that you want to get. Those are the 3 things that you really should keep in mind when you're writing this essay. Were you asking about the structure of essays as well? Because that's a sort of a different subtopic.
No, I was, you answered my question.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
what I would like to ask you now, you said that you should look interesting to the universities, so in the essays, but what does it mean to look interesting in an essay?
Yeah, that's a good question. And sort of course, like interesting, there are different ways to be sort of interesting and appealing, right? So I do think, and this is because, you know, I'm in the helping business, I'm in the writing business. I do think if you can write about your value of being a nice person is valuable. Because I feel like, okay, your transcript has really nothing about what kind of person you are, right? That's just how well you can perform in school. The teacher recommendations may write about, you know, okay, let's use my name as an example. Jane is a very nice person, and when a student is struggling, Jane is the first person to go over and offer to help. Or, you know, Jane is, you know, always very respectful from our classmates, even if a student says something that, you know, maybe she might not agree with. And so, okay, so all right, she seems like a nice person. She's not going to be like annoying in a classroom, right? However, you know, they may not know. Sometimes maybe Jane is like trying to ingratiate herself to the teacher. But if Jane writes about, right, if I write about, it is important to be helpful. It is important to be respectful of other people's opinions. It is important to be kind. It is important to notice, maybe nobody else notices someone's struggling, but I noticed and I was able to maybe help. And, you know, so I think if you can show that you value being a kind person, I think that can be great. It may not be appropriate for your essay. I've had students write wonderful essays about the creative process and letting go of perfectionism. That seems to be a common one. And that's great. And sort of even just giving themselves a break, showing that they have some coping skills. That's actually really important because, you know, a lot of students are under so much pressure academically. And if they can show, okay, I had this moment and I was able to get through it, you know, and, you know, like I said, just thinking about like the letting go of perfectionism, I realized it's okay if when I make this pot in pottery, it doesn't look perfect. It shows who I am. And it's a part of who I am. And I'm not always perfect. And when I don't do everything perfectly, I can forgive myself. So that's sort of showing how you make yourself look attractive, human, like a nice person, a person who is going to be kind, or a person who maybe, or, you know, attractive could be somebody who's like really intellectually curious. But that's what I mean by like attractive, like somebody who you feel would be a good person to have in a university for a variety of reasons, right? But that's what I guess that's what I mean as attractive. Like, oh yeah, we're glad to have them around. Did that answer your question?
Well, I see that it's very deep. So I'm saying again and again that it's very deep to have this kind of knowledge, let's say, it's about you, like to say, okay, I made a mistake and I forgive myself. Like this is like some people are working in therapy for years.
Right, exactly. And of course, you know, 17-year-olds are on a journey, as we all are. But even just that they have some sort of coping skills. I mean, one of the things I think that I tell students if they want to talk about the college experience, it's a big transition to go to school. And I think when you're telling students, this is a lot, you're going to be doing everything, you're going to be in charge of getting your own meals, washing your own clothes, going to class, keeping track of everything. And, you know, when I meet with, this summer I met with two students who just finished their freshman year, and they've both been very successful, but they said, yeah, the first year is like, it's a lot. It's just a lot coming at you. And if you can show some sort of, I have some coping strategies, right? Like if I encounter something new, I can sort of deal with it, you know, and absorb it and not be so concerned about it that I'm going to run away. Like that shows some sort of level of maturity and coping skills. And I think it's true for all students when they go off to college, but I think particularly students who are coming from another country where there's culture shock, there's different societal norms that may not be as much of a shock for American students. I mean, it's still a culture shock, I think, going to college, but I would imagine coming from outside of the United States, there's going to be even more things that are very different. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But Jane, now as you're talking, so all the activities that they are asking for in the application, actually, if you are a student who really did those activities, it's normal that you stepped out from your out of your comfort zone, doing and having all those responsibilities. And it's normal that you are going to have another level of understanding things in your life. So to deal with some personal stuff with people around you, and going through this experience, you are going to grow because you are going to learn from them. So it's normal that when you are going to arrive in the last year of high school to write that essay, you are going to have also not only the academics at a remarkable level, but also your activities and your personality, because you are going to learn more about yourself. So now I understand. So it's a normality to have all those three. Okay.
Exactly. One of this, not too many students, I think in part because of the pandemic and the community that I live in, the students are so busy with activities, but I love when students write about a work experience, because in a work experience, right, you're out in the real world, right? And usually involves some sort of customer employee interaction where either the writer, the student, right, has some sort of negative interaction with a customer and they have to figure out how to deal with the situation, right? Or they notice that one of their coworkers has a negative interaction and how they respond. So those are great, right? Because it shows like personal maturity, responsibility, coping skills. And as you know, that is very, very different than being successful in the classroom. And, very different than being successful in the classroom. I would argue that probably leadership skills and clubs and sports maybe more simulate, life in the real world. But even then, it's still a very, I guess, a controlled environment, but less controlled than a classroom. So any kind of that shows that this person is going to kind of have it together, to use an American, or have their act together. I don't know if you've heard that's an American, what's the word I'm thinking of? Euphemism for just like being able to kind of cope with what when life comes at them. And so being able to show, in addition to being a strong student, strong enough for your school, I also have these personal qualities that make me attractive and would be valued on your campus.
Jane, as you are an American citizen and you lived there, and you also been to Emory, as far as I remember, right? Emory University. Yep. Why it's so important for Americans, for American universities, to see in a high school student that has this kind of activities? Because I saw that in United States in the application, it's very important to have a variety, or to have at least some activities, community service, or any type of activities. So compared to what we are doing in Europe, so why do we need such activities? It's something related to the activities that you are going to do on campus afterwards?
Yes, I mean, I'm not an obvious employee of any American university, but I would say that I think when a student steps onto the campus, the university has the expectation that, yes, there will be all of this academic stuff that they do, but the university also wants students to feel like they're working on their human relationships. They're contributing to the life outside of the school. That's really, really important to schools, that they, and some of it is for marketing, right? So, actually, my school, Emory University, which never had a football team, this is like a joke about, still undefeated, right? Which is very unusual for a Southern school and an American school, right? But they do have other athletics, right? And they have Division III, which is not as competitive as Division I. And they have very good running program, which has been true since when I was there, like a long time ago. And so when I get emails, they'll say, they just won nationals. I'm this runner, like I said, I follow it a little bit. And so some of it is like, they can say, we have these brilliant students inside the classroom, but we also have athletes. We have somebody who sometimes it's a prestigious award, or they qualify for the Rhodes Scholarship, which is, you may have heard of, that's like a very prestigious award. But a lot of times they want, our student performances, got these recognition, or our orchestra tours around the world, or our chorus tours around the world. They want the school to have all these other things to show. We have brilliant scholars, but we also have artists, athletes, people who are interested in social activism, all of those things. And so that's why, and in addition to that, right, I mean, it's a lot, and they're like nice human beings, right? And they're kind, and they want to contribute to society, and not just like get the degree and, you know, go out there and do what they do. So that's why I think it is very important. And all students have gifts, right? And unfortunately, the classroom only highlights a very small part of our gifts, right? It's really like the cognitive and the logic and everything and the language. But do you know who you are? Are you kind to others? That is often, I mean, I obviously have no idea what it's like in Romania, but like even in the United States, a lot of times that those like personal qualities are not really rewarded in the classroom, except maybe at the end of the year, you know, when there's an award ceremony, but it's not, you know, and so I think the university wants to try to say, look at all these other things, look at all these other ways that our students are amazing. So I think that's why it's important to highlight, and, you know, you don't have to be amazing in that many ways, but like in some way, or something that you're really passionate about. It's really important to do.
Yeah, it's I love the educational system from the United States because of the so thanks to the contribution part from the community that students are asked to have, or they have the possibility to get in so many activities, and they have to choose, they can choose. So the idea of contribution in the community, like it's a valuable activity in order to develop it now while you are a student, because this is about everywhere when they're going to a job, or if they are going to become entrepreneurs. Doesn't matter what you are going to do after graduation, it's about contribution in the world. Doesn't matter like what we are doing. So I love this idea of contribution. So Jane, in the end, I would like to ask you, what are the common mistakes of students when they are writing an application, when they are writing an essay, common up essay? What do you think do now?
You know, when I work with students, we start sort of at the beginning and take it through to the end. But sometimes if I see other essays, so the first thing is that the essay should focus on the student, on the writer. So if they want to write about somebody else, somebody that they interacted with, a family member who really gave them who influenced them a lot, that's great. But they have to focus on themselves, right? So I had a student I think it was last year, she talked about like her grandmother. Your grandmother said, you come from good stock, right? You come from good people, right? Which is a nice idea. And this was a student who had pretty significant health issues, and how she was able to, you know, persistence, perseverance, to manage this health condition that she had, and also to become like an advocate for others who have this condition and raise money, right? So it was like the opening is, okay, my grandmother instilled in me, like you come from good people, right? But do not write about grandma, right? Just my grandma inspired me, and this is how my understanding of, I think it was like good stock, that was what the term was, and how I come from good stock. And it was just like coping with this very serious illness, and then helping others. And then I think maybe she wants to do research or you know, work in healthcare, but you don't even have to say what your future career is. So that's one thing, is to really focus on yourself. The other thing I would say is, you know, I think, and this is in some ways where I see the disconnect between writing about, you know, a work of literature and writing about themselves, is take me into the story, right? So if a student is writing about, like, she had this health condition, well, what did that feel like, right? She was in the hospital for a long time. She had crushing stomach pain that, you know, she was just, tears were leaking out of her eyes, felt like her stomach was on fire, whatever it was. So take us really into that. And I say to students, like, try to make us feel as a reader that you are there, if not experiencing what the writer is experiencing, then watching it, like almost like cinematically, right? And so so when students talk about, oh yeah, well, I was on the swim team and it was a tough meet and I made it by a second. No. Like the roar of the crowds, the pounding of your heart in the water. I guess I'm using a lot of swimming metaphors, right? The pounding of your heart in the water, right? How it feels when you emerge from the, you know, maybe you lost your goggles, right? Just really bring me in, so that I, who was not a competitive swimmer and never will be, I can understand what that feels like to be in the water with you. So that's one mistake that students do, is they don't bring us in close enough and tell us like how they were feeling. I can tell you a couple of common topics that, if that's helpful, that are not great.
I will ask you as well after you are going to share with us, I will ask you as well about something that I noticed mainly in the Romanian students.
Oh, okay. So things maybe not to do, and caveats. Do you want me to tell you about things not to write about?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so be as specific as possible. I mean, I could talk about this forever. You know, sometimes bring us into the story with dialogue, very powerful. Even if it's internal dialogue, did I just make a mistake? Right, that's internal dialogue rather than I think you just made a mistake. Right, that's talking to someone else. One sentence paragraphs, which American students are told never to write. You can write a one sentence paragraph. Stops the action. Make sure it's a good one. Right, it's a good place to stop. How did I get here? Like one of my students was like, it was going to be a long night. Like that's a good one, right? So those are some details that you can do in your writing. As far as things that are not, that a lot of admission officers see, talk about the 3 Ds, divorce, death, and disease. Okay, so now I'm going to say the caveats. Say, for instance, you write about divorce, right? Your parents got divorced, your grandparents got divorced. It was traumatic. I have no doubt it was traumatic and upset your life terribly. So it was hard. You know, I had to live in 2 different households. You know, that I'm sure was terrible. I shouldn't be, you know, saying it though. It was traumatic. But then you say something like, because of my parents' divorce, I had to become the chef, because I'm talking about cooking. So I learned how to make a dinner for 3 with 5 ingredients in the refrigerator. We always had butter, we always had eggs, we always had ham, could always whip up an omelet. But, you know, so it shows what you learned, right? That actually it's important to know how to cook. And cooking is more than just putting ingredients together and eating, right? It's about family, it's blah, 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 blah. So it could be, or I had to do the laundry, or I had to take care of my grandma, right? Who was very sick, right? And this is what I learned about working with, you know, the elderly. So if you did that, that's fine. Or like say, for instance, disease, right? Somebody in your family had a horrible disease and your family was shook by it. That's very sad. But then what do you want to say? Well, I had to, you know, transport my kids, or I saw that how much my uncle suffered having diabetes, and I wanted to learn about the, you know, the molecular basis of diabetes. I want to study because, or I wanted to become a healthcare worker to sort of alleviate some of that suffering. But not just like my uncle got diabetes and it tore our family apart. What did you learn from the experience, right? That's super, super important. You know, sort of death, the same idea as disease, right? Like, what did you learn from the death? Not that it was sad, but how did you change as a person?
Okay, I understand. And I would like to ask you, what do you think about the students? So from what you've told me, I understand that all the time the student has to return to himself or herself. To write about what is my lesson, what I had to do, like about me, not to be the story about mainly the particular event about
Right.
the other person, but to be what did I learn from there, how that event changed me, what actions I did afterwards. Okay. What lessons I learned and so on. Okay. What I saw in general for the Romanian students, that there are students who are doing a lot of activities, like many activities, and they want to introduce in their common application essay more activities, like to write about more activities. I did this, I did that, I did that. What do you think about this approach?
Okay, so I understand, and that sometimes American students have that. So my feeling is you only have 650 words. So no admission office is expecting you to, or anyone for that matter, to encapsulate themselves in 650 words. So to really, we talk about like a small moment, right? Talk about one thing, go just deep and small. That is going to be much more powerful than going this, right? They only have, you know, actually the students are pretty savvy. I said, how long do you think an admission officer will spend with your materials, your entire application? And they're like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. I'm like, bingo. I thought it was much longer. So they're not going to be spending somewhere between 8 to 10 minutes because they have so many applications. So you really want to bring them into like one moment, right? They're going to know if a student has a lot of awards. Okay, that's great. So do a lot of our other applicants, right? You know, if you're like #1 in a math contest, okay, that's good if it's a national math contest. But they're going to have #1 in a physics contest. It's also probably going to be compliant. And #1 in a, you know, whatever, in #1 in debate and #1 in speech, like, so, but if you can talk about something really, really specific, and there's a couple of ways to do it. You can try to highlight. So say, for instance, if you wanted to write about debate, and I did have a student write, not completely about debate, go really, really into like one round, one experience, and not just like, oh, and I won the trophy and I was so happy, but what was something that you learned, right? Maybe your politics slant this way and somebody made an argument that was actually super convincing, that was completely different, position than yours. So it's much more important to go really small and deep and explain why that's important, because the essay is really like, well, who is Jane Hirshhorn? We know she does these activities. We know she has these grades. Her teachers seem to like her. But what does Jane want to say about herself? And it's just one thing. And so they're not expecting everything, but try to pick something that's like really important. And I tell students also, this is also really important. You do not have to write about the most important thing that happened to you. I have a number of students who write stories about their personal lives that are absolutely heartbreaking. And I tell them, you do not have to write about that absolutely heartbreaking story. You can write about something that's, something else about you. So and if you are not comfortable writing about that really heartbreaking experience, then don't write about it. Write about something that's meaningful to you, but it doesn't have to be like the most meaningful thing, but it's something that shows who you are. So no, do not laundry list. That's what the activities list is for. Your job in the essay is to humanize yourself, make yourself look appealing, not perfect. If you can make an admission officer laugh, that's always a plus because they're reading a lot of essays. But if you are going to be funny in an essay, I would sort of show it to someone else just to make sure it actually is funny and it's not funny, or people are saying, I don't understand what you're doing here. But yes, go really small and deep. And you made a really good point, Leah, earlier, is that if you're telling a story about yourself, the end of the essay should not be, if you're telling a story about someone else, it should be about you. Like the story should drop out, right? Talking about this, volunteer experience or making my artwork. This is what I've learned about me. And the pot that you made, the film that you made, the person that you work with is really in the background and you are in the front because you are the one applying to college.
I understand. So about all the things that happened in my life, I have to choose only one piece that I want to talk about and that represent me at this moment, like who I am, and say something important about me, something meaningful about me. I understand. In Romania, we have as well students. There are Olympic students who have like international goals or your international results. And I saw very common that they are writing about their teacher, how their teacher from the 8th grade instilled in them the idea of learning physics and how they are grateful to that person. I saw a lot of them writing about this. What can you tell us about this?
So that's great that they have a teacher that inspired them. That always makes me happy, right? Because not all teachers are inspiring based on my own experience, but some are, right? So let's just use physics, of which I know very little because I'm a humanities person, but somebody inspires you to study physics, right? And so what was it about that teacher that said something about physics? Like, what was it? Maybe it was the first time they brought it to you and you were like, wow, I understand how objects move, right? Or maybe it's that it got you really into a very specific part of physics and why you love physics, right? But it really has to be focused on you. Like, I'm so grateful to, so-and-so for introducing it to me, but why physics and not fishing or not sports? Like, what is it about the beauty of physics? Like maybe before, up until that point, you saw physics as, just a series of mathematical equations, and now you see the beauty in the universe or something like that. But how you are changed by it. And so in some ways, the teacher is the inspiration, but then why were you so inspired, right? And focus on you. It doesn't mean that you can't tell this great story about the teacher in the classroom, but then like, why did your world open up from that point forward?
But Jane, if we know that the majority of students are writing about this specific topic, do you recommend that if I will apply this year to write, let's say if I will say, okay, I will look at the coming up essays and I say, I will write about my teacher. But after I find out, I see this episode of podcast and I see that, okay, there are many students that are writing about their teachers. Do you recommend in this case for me to pick up this topic, or I should change it because universities want to see variety?
Well, so first of all, I don't know. I've never had a student write about their teacher. So maybe it's not as common. Maybe it's more common in Romania to do that. So I obviously I have no idea what Romanian students are writing about on a large scale. My feeling is the teacher is just the beginning of the story, right? And so the story is about physics, or the story is about Russian literature, or the story is about mathematics, right? Story is about foreign language, right? So they're inspired by that teacher, but like, what was it about the maybe enthusiasm, right? The teacher was so enthusiasm, and their faith lit up when they were talking about, whatever they were talking about, Tolstoy's writing simplicity. I can talk about Tolstoy, right? The simplicity and the depth, right? And the teacher's face lit up, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is just from, a long time ago. And then I read it and wow. And then it made me sort of understand human relationships or something like that. But so the teacher can be a source, an inspiration point. But remember, it's just like if you write about like grandma, okay, so grandma said something to you, and that's what led to where you are. It could be something like, I'm really interested in teaching, right, because of this teacher, but it should be focused on, well, how did that affect you? So I would say that most of my students actually do not write about academic pursuits. But it doesn't mean that you can't. I did have a student write about he liked to do a lot of he working with a CNC mill, and he liked computers, and he liked making stuff. And he talked about his teacher was a resource for him, but it was really about the process of making something from a CNC mill. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to write about an inspirational teacher, but write about how it affected you. And so most of the essay should be about you.
I understand. And as you're talking about this, what would be a recommended structure for an essay? From where to start, how to start? How should be the introduction? Should be like, my name is Leah and I want to apply to your university, or how should be the essay?
Right. So there are two main structures that it seems like admission officers like, based on what I have read. And the first one is called narrative structure, or sometimes I'll call that story and lesson, right? Where the student tells a story about themselves, and then they talk about what they learned, right? And I tell students to be very quantitative, that the story should be about 400-ish words, and the lesson should be about 200-ish words. And then in the story section, you can talk about, and the thing is, as you said, do not start with, my name is Jane Hirschhorn and I want to apply to your school. You want to start with, as my hands were over the lump of clay and I brought it up, I could see my pot start to flop, right? So you want to get right in the moment, right? So we talk about this as I tell them there's this term called in medias res, which means in the middle of things, right? And I use Tolstoy as an example, right? At the beginning of Anna Karenina, the household is in disarray, right? Because the lady of the house has discovered that her husband has had an affair, and the household is topsy-turvy, right? And it does start out, all happy families are alike, all unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. Great line. But then it says, the household was in disarray. So you're right in there. You're like, okay, there's chaos here. There's a lot of pain. And so you really want to hook your reader. And I hate that expression, but you really want to engage your reader and say, what? And sometimes you could be like, there was noise around me, and I thought, how am I going to, endure the next couple of hours? Where is this person, right? So you have some curiosity there. So that's like story and lesson. The other type of essay is called a montage essay, which is, I think, based on film, which is that you have a single image or theme, and then you tie the essay to all of these ideas. So I had one student this past essay cycle write about coffee. He likes to fix things. He wrote about finding a broken espresso machine on the side of the street and fixing it, and, getting to make a cup of coffee, and how excited he felt, right? That shows that he's curious. It shows that he can fix stuff, right? And then the next image, he talked about working as a barista, right? Which is a work thing. So he talked about not just one story he told was that his manager asked him to work the last shift of the day and the first shift the next day, which is called the clopen, like close and open, and how that's a little bit more challenging because obviously you don't have as much rest in between shifts, right? So that essay, so that section and how he did it, and he got up and he was, because he said, so I'm always up for trying new things. That's a value, right? He's interested in trying new things. So he works the clopen and he, survives the thing. And then the next part of the essay is about working as a barista and his coworkers, and how he learns that some of his coworkers, have difficulty supporting themselves on a barista salary because it's difficult to support yourself on a barista salary, and how some of his coworkers have had, challenging childhoods. And, the implications, this writer has not had a challenging childhood. And so all of this is kind of around the idea of coffee, right? Working at the coffee shop, fixing the coffee machine, and how it speaks to his values. So that's what's called a montage essay. Or it could be, I have learned so much about baking, right? To use that example, I've learned about chemistry, right? I've learned about caring for others. I've learned about creativity, right? And so those are the two main structures. And it really depends on, the best structure is the one that you feel like you can spend a lot of time. And that's the other thing, you're going to be spending time revising and writing. So whichever one, I have students who are very much like, I want to do a narrative essay. And some people are like, I want to do a montage essay. And really whatever is best for the writer and whatever they feel the most comfortable and excited to write about is the best structure.
Super. Thank you for this information. I think it's very valuable for students. And the last question would be, I saw in the common application that there are several topics for the Common Up essay. And the last one is share an essay on any topic of your choice. So if they are choosing the last one to doing something on their own, so not picking up something that it's higher, right. It is a disadvantage in their application process, or do you recommend a certain subject more than the other?
Okay, so I will tell you, I have never had a student pick this option that I've worked with. I met somebody who did that. And so my feeling is if you choose that topic, an essay that you've already written, chances are you're going to have to rewrite it. Because let's just say if you wrote a paper, I did have a student actually last cycle write a paper about Robert Oppenheimer. I know the movie just came out, right? And it was a really actually, I think of a fairly creative essay for a history class. They had to do a research paper on a historical figure and then create a monument for that figure and design it, right? So he talked about like what he would do, where he would put the Robert Oppenheimer memorial, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just use that example, Robert, who's a controversial figure, right? And you would have to take all of that, I think it was a pretty long paper, maybe like 6-7 pages, and you would have to boil that down to 650 words. And not just that, it's not like, okay, I think Robert Oppenheimer is worthy of study. Well, why, right? What would you say about Oppenheimer that relates to you? So if you pick that topic or something else, right, you would have to revise it saying, well, just like that, we talked about like the teacher who inspires a student, what inspires, like if, let's just say with Oppenheimer, I got really interested in talking about physics, right? I got really interested in physics. And I know he was like, was trying to end the war and blah, blah, blah. But it got me really interested in how we use science, technology, engineering to benefit for humanity as we're like writing the rules, right? There's this metaphor, like you're building the road while you're driving on it, right? So that's a lot of times what's happening with technology. So how does that inspire you? Like that would be a really interesting essay. Like how would you as a student make sure that stuff that you're creating and developing or that you're helping to do would make it socially responsible. So you could still write a really interesting essay. And in some ways, a lot of the ideas you might have already kind of stored in your head, but you'd have to revise it. You'd have to spend a lot of time revising it so it fits that, personal essay format, right? But like I said, I've never had a student try that. I'd like to try it sometime, but it's not, to my knowledge, it's not a super common choice. The person that I know who did it, who's not somebody that I worked with, said that the teacher was very much like, okay, I want you to write this and you can use it for your common application essay. They were a very savvy teacher, but it was not a teacher that I knew professionally.
I understand. I feel that this subject of the essays for the application in the United States are very broadened, and that we would spend like another hour easily talking about this. So I would love to invite you for a next time to discuss maybe also about the supplemental essay, because now we discussed mainly about the common application essay, and to address also the questions usually the students have about the supplemental essay. So I don't have any other questions question at this moment for you, and I would like to thank you very much for being today with us. For the Romanian students, and it's very valuable because you have already experience and you're already there in the United States, and you've been yourself a student in the United States, and you already are working with Romanian students. So I would like to thank you very much for staying with us today. To all of you that you joined this episode, I invite you to write your comments if you have any questions, and I will follow up with Jane to answer you. If you like our content, I invite you to share our episode with your friends, or to like it or to subscribe it on our channel, in order for you to get all the information that we are preparing for you, because we have here valuable information on every episode. Thank you to all of you. Thank you, Jane, again, and see you to the next episode.
Thank you very much, Leah. It was my pleasure. And students, good luck to you on writing your essays. You will write wonderful ones.